Thank you. I'm quite honored to be here, and I would like to refer back to what Istok said yesterday, that you are inviting different people. Well, I'm quite different, yes. And thank you for being here and not sightseeing, especially considering that the sun is out again. So what I'm going to talk about is, well, it's based on a particular bilingual dictionary project, but I want to take it to a more general level and talk about what it means to create a dictionary at all, and how do we explain why communication works, and how these two might be related to each other. And by the end, I will get back to the bilingual dictionary project and discuss how the methods that I've been talking about could be applied to a general language dictionary, and what do the lexicographers think about that as far as I have seen so far. So the project is bilingual, bidirectional, general language translation dictionary, namely Estonian-Latvian and Latvian-Estonian, so we need both directions, and we have a finite amount of resources available for that. The general languages, the general requirements are like they normally are. It should be a good dictionary. It's a general language. It will be published both in electronic form and on paper. The official requirement is that it should have 40,000 keywords, and it should be a good dictionary. What we would like to achieve with selecting the compilation method is the list down there. We would like to spend less resources on the compilation, or actually get the compilation done faster, easier than with traditional methods compiling two language directions separately, which is actually what at least part of the lexicographers taking part in the project would want. We would like more consistency than is the case in normal dictionaries published so far. Especially, we would like to make the two language directions consistent, so that if one language direction says that these two words are equivalent, then the other language directions should not contradict that claim. And we, as a more minor concern, we would like to get the coverage to be uniform. If all the days of the week are in except Saturday, then we would want Saturday to be in as well, if possible. I've taken a random example. I was trying to think of an example using English and another language that would be more or less generally understandable here. Then I Googled for a bilingual dictionary, and one of the first ones I found was English-German and German-English dictionaries in collinsdictionary.com. And I used the English word table, and I looked it up in the English-German direction. And what you see here is that you have a head word, and then you have all kinds of data about that head word, including its meanings and its equivalents in the target language. If we would try to write down or draw the data structure of this dictionary article, then it might look something like this. There is the entry for table and all of its properties, like pronunciation, part of speech, and what the dictionary compiler has wanted to put in there. Then it has a synonym, just to repeat, there's a synonym in one of the senses, banquet table, and then there are three German equivalents, which I have shown in a graph structure like this. It could be implemented in any kind of database, be it a graph database like, directly graph implementation like drawn here, a relational database, XML, anything. If we now look in the opposite direction, if we look up Tisch in the German-English direction, then it gives slightly different information. Even in a simple case like this, it has also synonyms and several English equivalents, and I could draw that like this. Tisch has two synonyms which are represented in the same dictionary. Schreibtisch and Mahlzeit are represented in the dictionary as separate entries, and Werktisch is not. This is an example of the kind of consistency in synonym presentation that I would like to achieve, that if some of them are present, then let all of them be present. Or if the compiler decides them not to be present, then okay, none of them. If we now think of the project at hand, that we need both language direction at the same time, and they should be compiled with as little resources as possible, and they should be consistent to each other, then we could try to put them together in the same picture. And now this picture gets complicated. And this is expectable. Language is complicated. The arrows that I have drawn that go outside of this picture go to other equivalents, like the German Tafel has other equivalents in English. So if I would start to draw the graph here, completing all the arrows, then it would continue endlessly. The graph is, what do they call it? Connected? There are no isolated islands in this graph in a dictionary of any reasonable size. This picture is problematic mainly in one respect. It contains a many-to-many relationship, which is very difficult to implement in many of the database architectures currently in use for dictionaries. It is completely impossible in XML. It is doable in a graph, and it is sort of doable in a relational database. In a relational database, what they do is they use an intermediary table, what they call a junction table, which connects the two tables of words that we had so far. Now I've added the circles in the center represent the junction table. And the point of this exercise is that we now have a one-to-many relationship between the junction table entry and the words. So each junction table entry has exactly one word corresponding to it on each language side. In the other directions, it's many. It's one word can be related to more than one junction table entry. Normally in relational databases, for instance, if we have an accounting database where we have entries for customers and entries for orders, products is a better example. We have a table for customers, a table for products. Then it may be that each customer buys several products, and each product is bought by several customers. So it's a many-to-many relationship, and this is implemented using a junction table, which is purely technical. This junction table there does not have any meaning, any cognitively relevant meaning. But in this case, it seems that the junction table might be cognitively relevant. We could see that the entries, especially if grouped like this, could be seen as having some real meaning. And this meaning actually is what we usually call meaning in language. If we draw it like this, then it becomes slightly more clear that in the meaning of a meal, the German word Tisch, at least according to this Collins dictionary, is synonymous with Mahlzeit, and it means the meal thing, and the English word meal also means the meal thing. Can you see a problem with this picture? We are back to many-to-many relationship. Each word can designate several, or each word can mean several things, and each meaning can be expressed using several words. There's an easy solution to that. But before we go there, let's have a brief look at why communication works at all. I don't have the answer. I don't know how communication works. I have a certain belief, and each of you also has a belief. And I suppose since you are dealing with language, each of you has a very well thought out belief, a very clear picture of why you think communication works. And starting with Reddy's classical work from 79, the two major paradigms that could be explained, that could be used for explaining how or why communication works, could be the conduit metaphor and the toolmaker's paradigm. The conduit metaphor is basically a picture where if we have two people talking to each other, then the speaker puts his thoughts on a train, carefully selecting the cars in the train to suit the thoughts, based on their shape perhaps. And in language it would be, we select the words that have suitable meanings for what we have in mind. Then we send this across to the listener, and the listener retrieves the meanings from the words, or takes out the things from the cars of the train. Quoting Reddy, this will always succeed. Let's make a test. I'm not asking you to raise hands who believes which one, but please think for yourself which one do you believe. And at the end of the talk, think again. And I suspect that there will be very few people, if any, who will have changed their mind. Meaning that my attempt to send things by train to you has not been successful. So it's at least conceivable that success does not take place. The other paradigm is slightly more difficult to put in words. It's Reddy has written several pages just describing the situation. There are people who are capable of producing tools and capable of exchanging blueprints for building those tools among themselves, but they are not able to see each other, they are not able to see what the others are building, and they are not able to communicate verbally in this exercise. And of course, the blueprints are like texts, and the tools are like thoughts. So the way this paradigm works is that each communicator tries to explain something to the listener. The success is not guaranteed. The success depends also on the properties of the listener. And sometimes the listener does not understand the blueprints at all, even though they can perfectly well read the language that is used for designing those blueprints. And again, quoting Reddy, human communication will almost always go astray unless real energy is expended. So one method guarantees success and is based on the assumption that words have meanings. The other one is based on the assumption that words do not have meanings. words only acquire meanings in the presence of a competent interpreter. So the listener does not retrieve the meaning from the words, but reconstructs, or by some accounts even constructs the meaning after reading the text. So far, these two are a matter of personal preference and religious beliefs. I think it's clear that I believe the second one, but I suspect that there are many in this room who believe the first one. There are also many in this room who prefer the second one, and some people I talked to yesterday said, "Do you really think that there are people who believe the first one?" Yes, I do. Most of what is being done in linguistics is based entirely on believing the first one. If we study word meanings, then we assume that words have meanings. If we talk about language, then we assume that there is such a thing as language, apart from in linguistic meta-discourse. But I would like to talk about one possible way of showing empirically that one of them is more successful than the other. In learning theory, again referring back to the 70s, this is the learning theory that is still regarded as the most influential or the most accurate account of how learning takes place, both in humans and in animals. In rat experiment, if we ring a bell and give the rat an electric shock, then this will associate for the mind of the rat, will associate the bell and the shock. And each time a bell is followed by a shock, the association gets stronger. Now, when shock follows something else apart from a bell, like for instance a flash of light, then the association between the bell and the shock decreases. And also, if the rat sees the bell, which is not followed by the shock, the connection again decreases. And in humans as well, children, for instance, first language acquisition, when they see that, or when they observe that a certain sequence of sound waves is used in connection with food, for instance, then they associate this sequence of sound waves with food. And all the other options as well. If they see some other sound waves associated with food, then the first one decreases. If they see the same sound waves associated with something else, then the first one decreases. Why I'm mentioning it here is that it is possible to have the opinion that everything in language is based on statistics. There is no such thing as language, no such thing as fixed meanings. It's all statistics. It's all very clever animals making inferences from what they see and hear. Based on the previous, to more concretely language-related or language acquisition-related studies, a thing called feature label order effect by Michael Ramskar and a group of people is the observation that when we show to a child the word green and then show a green color, then the child will not learn the association between them. If we show a green-colored object and say that this thing is green, then the child learns the association between these two. And this is directly related with a curious observation in first language acquisition literature that color terms are very difficult to learn for children in their native language. And this, Ramsker and others explain this using learning theory and also information theory and abstraction theory, based on the observation that there are many more things in the world than there are words in language. So the set of things that we want to refer to is much bigger than the set of labels that we use for referring to them. And the features and labels, features are then aspects of the world, and labels are words. And this failure of children to learn meanings of words is explained basically on the premises that it is not possible to do the abstraction process from the smaller set to the bigger set. You could imagine, as another example for this, abstracts for scientific papers. It is perfectly possible to take a paper on a subject that you know, read it and write the abstract, write a reasonable abstract. It is not possible to take an abstract and reconstruct the paper unless you know the subject and the authors very well. The same for words. It is possible to look at the world and say what these things are called. It is not possible to look at a word and say, what does this thing mean? And a nicer way to say it is that recovering a meaning from a word is necessarily underspecified. There is not enough information in a word to know what it means. It means many more things than is directly encoded in. So back to the data structure. Here we basically have words and meanings, and words mean things, or for each word there is the property of meaning something. We could in principle turn this around based on the previous discussion. We think of the concepts or the meanings, but I wouldn't like to use the word meaning because it's normal to think that meaning is a property of a word. So I'm using the word concepts. We use concepts or representations of parts of the world in our minds, something that we want to assign labels to. And then we have assigned labels to these things. Technically, this is very similar. We just turned around the arrows and changed the labels on the arrows. So it's nothing special, really. But it's fundamental in terms of how we think about why communication works. And also, what I'm trying to get to is it's fundamental in terms of how we approach compiling a dictionary. We still have the problem of many-to-many relationships. But remember what we had before starting to turn this thing around. We had, or what we normally have in mainstream dictionaries. We have meanings repeated. Like if two words mean the same, then we have two articles and both of them say something about the meaning. So the meaning is represented, if we have two full synonyms, based on the precision of this particular dictionary, then this one meaning is listed in two places. We could do the same here with words. So instead of meanings, let's repeat words. So we'll get rid of the many-to-many relationship. Each concept will be designated by zero or more words in each language. Zero because we might not have this thing lexicalized in that particular language, or our dictionary could just be incomplete. But each word only has one concept that it designates. And this is achieved by repeating the words. So we don't have the word table. We have 3 words, table 1, table 2, table 3. And each of these is monosemous. Getting to the application. What we could do to achieve the goals that I started from, reducing the amount of work and improving consistency, is use an anomaziological data structure, concept-based, like we start from a concept. Each concept has several words to it, rather than the semasiological, where we have words and each word has several senses to it. Of course, this has to be converted to a form that is intuitively understandable for users. So if we get to the lower corner of Adam's picture, when we get to the users, then of course this thing has to be changed. What I'm talking about now is the lexicographer's way of thinking, not the users. We should compile the 2 language directions at the same time. So if we have 2 words that mean the same, then they should mean the same, not that they mean the same only in half of the dictionary and they mean something else in the other half of the dictionary. And we should have synonyms in one entry. It was like in the previous one, Schreibtisch and Tisch 2 are synonyms according to this simplified presentation. And they should be put together in, or they should be related to the same concept entry. And since synonyms are always processed together, then it's technically not possible to create inconsistencies between them, because we don't create synonym references manually. They appear automatically in the presentation phase when this thing goes to the user. And synonym coverage is uniform if these 2 things are synonyms, or if these 2 records contain 2 synonyms each, then these synonyms pairs are always presented consistency. None of them is missing. And now I'm getting to the objections that lexicographers have presented. The first one, of course, is that, of course, words have meanings. How can we do dictionaries if we think that words don't have meanings? Or even I've been told that you can't tell me that words don't have meanings because I've devoted my life to studying word meanings, and this would be meaningless in that case, so just shut up. But then, yes, it's okay for me if you really think that words have meanings. That's fine. If you think that there is a bearded man up there, that's also fine. But in that case, if you are studying meanings that you claim exist, then show me a method of measuring them without using humans. Of course, you can measure opinions of humans about word meanings. This is completely consistent with the toolmaker's paradigm. You measure what people think that words mean. And of course, people think various things about what words mean. The problem is that each individual thinks in a slightly different way. So I don't know of a method to measure word meanings objectively. Yes, you can measure distributional similarity in a corpus, but that only tells you how similar these 2 things are in this particular corpus. You take a different corpus, you get a different similarity. And also, you don't get anything about where or what does it mean, or what do these 2 words mean. We know that they mean the same thing, but we don't know what they mean from this kind of analysis. If the lexicographer starts from the premise that words have meanings, then I would just say that please be careful with normative statements, like this word means this, and it must mean this, especially in a dictionary that is compulsory to school children or even the public in general, that sometimes dictionary publishers or dictionary compilers want to say that I know what is right. And I'm just asking, please be careful with that. And the use of meta-language, like the use of the word meaning, should also be considered perhaps a bit more than it has been so far. We're getting more technical in the objections. People think that if I compile the dictionary in an onomasiological way, then of course I have to present it to the user in the same way. This is not the case. I can turn it around to semasiological. This is quite easy, and this can be done fully automatically, unlike the opposite direction. The opposite direction is very difficult to do because normal manually compiled dictionaries contain so many errors that in order to turn it around to concept-based, you have to correct them all, and this takes an enormous amount of time. I've tried it on a specialized dictionary with 6,000 entries, and turning it around to concept-based took about 3 times as much time as it took to compile it in a word-based way in the first place. And what we need to do to convert the concept-based database or onomasiological database into a word-based or a semasiological or alphabetical dictionary is first separate the synonyms. If we have Schreibtisch and Tisch 3 in one concept entry, then we should put them, Schreibtisch goes under S and Tisch 3 goes under T, and this Tisch 3 should be united or merged in one nice lexicographic entry with Tisch 1 and Tisch 2 and Tisch 4 and so on. I've put homonyms in parentheses there because it's the compiler's decision whether homonyms and polysyms should be distinguished at all, or if yes, then how should they be presented? Like Roman numbers and Arabic numbers, or numbers and letters, or separate articles and semicolons, or whatever. Next objection. My readers are looking for word meanings. So if I'm not telling them word meanings, then this is not what my readers want. But I'm saying that this relationship between form and content is symmetrical. If we write into the database our knowledge about how concepts are called and then turn this around, then we get an answer to the reader's question, what do words mean? And it should be quite transparent. There should not be any difference at all between these two directions of looking at the same relationship. The compiler can't access the dictionary. Now this is a bit more serious because normally, of course, every dictionary compilation process starts from a word list or from a corpus or from some other kind of textual material, whatever that textual material is. So in the beginning, we don't have the concept. And I haven't been able to think of any method of retrieving the concepts. Again, we could use various statistical methods to retrieve relationships between concepts, but not the concepts themselves. So we can't create, even semi-automatically, the entries in the concept table or entries for the concepts. What we need to do instead is take this word list or take an existing word-based dictionary and start merging synonym entries. If we find 2 full synonyms, then put them together into one concept entry. And how do we find them? We could use a thesaurus, which says that they are synonyms. We could use a synonym dictionary if we have one available, which says that these 2 are synonyms, or at least candidate synonyms. We could use distributional semantics, which shows us that the vectors are pointing in the same direction. And also, if we have available for the languages in question dictionaries that use definition by synonym, then we could use those as well. Surprisingly many entries, at least in Estonian large dictionaries, use synonyms as definitions. Tish 3 would be explained just as Schreibtisch. And we could extract that information, for instance, looking at definitions which are at most one word long, and use these as synonyms or candidate synonyms. Another answer to the objection that the compiler has trouble accessing the dictionary is that seeing the synonyms together actually helps the compiler to treat them more consistently in the dictionary. And of course, all kinds of other language technological tools should also be used, like word sketches, distributional semantics, thesauri, and so on, to look at things that we should treat together. Like if we're writing the entry for table, then we should also look at chair, cupboard, and things like that. It has been told to me that it has been, now my English fails me, said to me that words do not have one-to-one equivalence, which is based on the assumption that in terminology they do. And this method, since it comes from terminology and people know that I come from terminology, they say, well, you can't use it here. Of course, you can do it there at your home, but you can't do it here. Here, word meanings are more flexible. A word in one language can have several equivalents in the other language. It's not possible to express things in one language as it is in the other, and so on. My answer to this is that yes, of course, and the number of concepts should reflect both the number of senses in language 1 and the number of senses in language 2. So that if we take back this picture, then the amount of senses that we have here, which is 6, is like the English word meanings and the German word meanings combined. Some of them coincide and some do not. This creates a problem for the lexicographers that if I have more or possibly many more languages in my dictionary than 2. For instance, if I have 3 languages, English, German, and Estonian, if I would add Estonian to this particular example, then German Tisch 1 and Tisch 2 would both be loud in Estonian. And this would be counterintuitive for the user to see that Tisch 1 is loud 1 and Tisch 2 is loud 2, and we don't know what the difference is between them. So the user is not told between these languages why there are 2 entries. And the reason why there are 2 entries is that the third language chooses to differentiate between them. And in principle, such a situation could be remedied, again, fully automatically, if the presentation layer sees that we have 1 is 1 and 2 is 2, then just compress them into 1, decrease the rest of the numbers by 1, and that's it. What is also claimed is that in terminology, concepts have clear edges. And in general language, of course, word meanings do not. There is the prototype theory. There are other explanations of why meanings are fluid. They also change in time. And it is claimed that in terminology they do not. And that's why in terminology you can do concept-based things. You can operate with concepts. First of all, this is not a popular view in terminology nowadays either. In terminology, you also, in very rare cases, have clear-cut concepts. In very strange normative contexts, you only can have concepts with clear edges. It's also fluid there, it's also fuzzy, It also follows the prototype theory, and so on. And of course, I'm still saying that words are inanimate objects that do not do anything. They, for instance, they do not mean something and they do not refer to anything. It's humans who do things. So this is sort of not a problem at all. But answers for practical dictionary work is that you have to write something in the dictionary. If you just use normal traditional dictionary writing methods, you have to write a definition for the word. You have to put in words what you think the meaning of the word is. And this is discrete anyway. So you have to make a decision where you put the boundaries of the meaning. So the minute you write it down, it becomes a simplification for the purposes of this dictionary, and this simplification has clear boundaries. So it's not different from the semasiological and onomasiological approaches are not different in this sense. What onomasiology does is it helps the compiler unify the level of simplification. That I can sort of make up my mind how much I simplify, how much I cut away the fuzzy edges of concepts. There are no full synonyms. There is nothing that I could put in one entry in general language. Again, the answer is really the same, that normal dictionaries compiled semasiologically do contain synonym references. They do contain statements that this word means the same as that word. And if you write that and you do it manually, is not different from creating such a reference automatically. Putting them together in one entry, in one concept entry, and doing it automatically. And again, onomasiology helps you unify the level at which you consider these things synonyms. And if you decide that these two are not synonyms, then it would be polite towards the user to tell them why, or what's the difference. I don't see much point in saying that these two are different, but I'm not telling what's the difference. And the main objection, I think, is that this method takes too much time and effort. I don't like to decide whether these two things are synonyms or not. I don't want to spend time on deciding such things. And my answer to this objection is, of course, it's always easier to create a bad dictionary compared to creating a good dictionary. Or in slightly less evaluative terms, it is easier to create a dictionary that contains less information compared to a dictionary that contains more information. Like if it is perfectly possible in a semasiological dictionary to get away without telling the user or the reader if these two are synonyms or not, or if these two are equivalents of each other or not. Like in the example that I used, English and German, very widespread words, easy place, completely mainstream, and still in one language direction, these two things are equivalents of each other, and the same words, if you look at the other direction, are not. This approach in the semasiological dictionary, I think, can be explained using trivalent logic, or logic with more than two truth conditions, truth states, sorry. Normally you just have true and false, but a statement can be either true or false, but can't be this true and false at the same time. Or a statement and its negation cannot be true at the same time. In trivalent logic, they can. It is possible to say in my dictionary on page 17 that these two are synonyms, and on page 57 that they are not synonyms. It is fully possible, and from talking to lexicographers, I know that this is frequently done on purpose, that I'm not ready to decide if they are synonyms or not, so I use trivalent logic. I say that they are and they are not. They are and they are not. Again, in this case, I do not understand what is the purpose of writing this down on paper and publishing it in a nice binder. Just to tell the reader that I do not have an opinion on this topic, or that I do not know. Then why write it down at all? And I'm getting to my conclusions. So, has there been any change? Again, I'm not asking you to raise hands because it would be embarrassing in one way or another. But think for yourself, did I manage to convince you? If you thought the other way before. Now, if you thought the other way, and I did not manage to convince you, then this proves my point. In my opinion, it's very difficult to measure word meanings. I can't think of any method to do that. It is difficult to prove the correctness of claims about correctness or meaning. If somebody says that this word means this, or this word does not mean this, which is also the case for some dictionaries, then it's very difficult to prove how this claim could be true objectively, outside of the mind of the compiler. The tools that I've described help a bit in improving consistency, but this does involve additional human effort. So I would, it's relatively big simplification if I say that compiling a bidirectional dictionary in this way would be half of the effort of compiling it the traditional way. It's certainly more, because the compiler needs to iron away the differences that currently exist between these two language directions. But I'm also hoping that you can at least understand why I think this way, is that there is no theoretical reason why these things should not be used in a general dictionary. And the practical issues are another thing, starting from the fact that it is simply difficult to convince lexicographers to participate in such a project. We've already had fierce fights in this Latvian dictionary project. People have basically left the project because they do not agree to compile in a onomasiological way. And they have started a separate project of their own, compiling in a semasiological way. And my final thought, yesterday I got a letter from a student of mine in feedback to something I had written, and she said that it's clear that you like to think about these things. Yes, I do, and I encourage you to think about why, now, if you also believe in the toolmaker's paradigm, then if you believe in that, then why do you compile dictionaries in the semasiological way? And why would these two not be made consistent? Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Yes.
Couldn't ask before, so using your turn now.
Now, I asked my question yesterday, but you inspired me to think about the difference between good arguments and bad arguments. And you asked if you have managed to convince. I would say no, since you are not convincing, you are justifying your point of view, and you are doing this with good arguments. If you would like to convince the audience, then you would be rather more aggressive and persuade, you know. And
I've tried that.
I wish now, but this is me personally. I think that justification is much better. Then you leave the other part of audience to think, really think. Since if you are aggressive, they just defend, and that's no. I think like this, and I don't want to listen to you. And I wish that the other part would or had justified their point of view, and maybe in this case, your project would be successful.
Possible.
So, so I'm Thomas François from UC Louvain. So I just wanted to have your opinion, because from a psycholinguistic point of view, I don't see that the second explanation about meaning means that there is no meaning. So, I mean, for me, I see more like you have the blueprint, that would be the form, and then it is selected by the mental lexicon that you have in mind, then you send it to the person that receives it, and that will trigger in its own mental lexicon a meaning. And the problem is not that there is no meaning, but there is too many meaning. So I don't know what you think about this vision, or is it like different from your own? Or thank you.
Thank you for the question. Yes, I didn't spend too much time saying what I mean by meaning. My title was not that there is no meaning, but that words do not have meaning. Meaning is not a property of words. Meaning is a property of humans. Meaning is situated in the mind. It's not situated in the language. That's what I'm saying. And of course, there is speaker meaning, hearer meaning, conventional meaning, any kinds of things, but not semantic meaning. Or you could even say that there is semantic meaning, but in the mind of the semanticist.
Yeah, my name is Thierry Leclerc from Academy in Vienna. Applying this onomasiological view on general language, how would you represent this at the end? It would not be a dictionary, I guess. It would not be a book. It would be a network. It would be a graph. It would be human readable or only machine readable? I mean,
human readable, yes. This is the conversion process from the onomasiological database to the semasiological dictionary. It could be just like I started by converting an existing word-based dictionary into the onomasiological form. The same process goes the other way, and we get a dictionary that looks exactly like current traditional dictionaries, only it will be a bit more consistent than the ones we have now. So yes, it is completely human readable.
Just one thing that puzzles me is, any thoughts on if you declare that, if you want to say that two words are synonyms, yet one of them's, in one language it's a low frequency word, and in the other language it's a high frequency word?
Properties in this graph or data structure where we have words and concepts could be attached to the concepts, the words, and the edges between the concepts and the words, in principle. So, as far as I've seen so far, all properties that I would have liked to represent in the database could be assigned into one of these three categories. So word frequency, I think, would be a property of the connection between the word and the meaning, because the word is infrequent in this meaning. It could be frequent in another meaning, right? So you could put the information there, and then it's a matter of the presentation layer, if, and if yes, then how will this be presented to the user. And again, it can be presented exactly the same way as it is done now, if it's done now. The same goes for things like geographic labels or stylistic labels. That yes, this thing refers to the same object, but it's a swear word. So they are not directly interchangeable in any context. They are interchangeable in some contexts, and it would be nice to tell this to the user. Again, the more information we give to the reader, the better. But if we only try to create a simple dictionary, then we can do away with that. Like, for instance, leave out all the infrequent words.
I just have a short comment, which is referring to Thierry's comment. I wanted to bring your attention to that there is an effort in a domain which is called formal ontology, and they are trying exactly the same, which seems to me what you have described. And their effort is going towards the idea that machines would be able to read dictionaries, or so they are dedicated sticking to concept and making information orthogonal and removing redundancy as much as possible. Do you think this is do you have an opinion about this effort?
My opinion about the ontology crowd is not as informed as I would like it to be. So I wouldn't say too much about ontology. But what seems to me is that, to my taste, they are too much based on formal semantics. Like they are trying to design features and then distinguish between the concepts based on those features, and it's manual work. Creating an ontology is largely manual work, and I don't think this is sustainable. That you can't do, I think as it has been mentioned in at least one presentation before, that you can't rely on manual work for under-resourced languages. You have to find some method that is fully automatic, and I don't know of any methods of retrieving the concepts that would be fully automatic, at least so far. What I've done is I've used, especially in translation, I've used machine translation as a swear word to refer to bad human translators. And one day, one machine will be offended by that. And that will be the day when machines can read. I think that it's approximately the same level of intelligence that you need for understanding text and for being offended. You need self-awareness, basically. And that will come soon. I know many people are afraid of that, but it will come soon.
Megan?
I'm afraid this might be a silly question because, sorry, I'm here. Because onomasiology is only something I can sort of pronounce, but not much else. Sort of. So my question really is, you took an example of a bilingual dictionary and found problems with it, which are very common in bilingual dictionaries, in my experience. And I suppose my question is, are you saying that it's impossible to make a dictionary in a more traditional way and avoid those problems? Because certainly in the very small bilingual dictionaries that I've worked on, some of those things are exactly the things we have tried not to do. Tried to make real synonyms, whatever that might mean, but at least not strings of words that have a relation but not a synonymous relationship. And if it's not impossible to make a dictionary using more traditional methods that overcomes most of those problems, is it the automaticity that is the issue, or is it partly that when one is working with 60, 80,000 head words, that the problems are greater than when you're working with 5,000 head words?
I think the main issue is that I'm trying to increase consistency or other aspects of quality and reduce workload at the same time. Of course, if you increase the workload, then you can achieve anything using manual labor. You can hire 10 editors, have every entry checked against the whole rest of the dictionary manually. It is possible, yes. But automatically it will be easier.
Can I add one thing to that? Using Tonalex will help to solve several of those problems, was my immediate thought when I saw your list, which might sound like advertising speak, but...
Yes, from the products of that company, I would use TL term, and I've asked the people there already several years ago if they have the method of converting a concept-based structure from TL term into a word-based structure in Tonalex. And at first they didn't understand the question, and when I managed to get my train across to them, they said that yes, we have it on the feature requests list, but not yet.
Last question.
To be frank, I'm rather skeptical about the onomasiological approach.
I know.
Your examples are about concrete nouns, but would it be possible to do that for abstract nouns, for verbs,
yes,
for adjectives?
Yes, and the simple answer is that you write something in the dictionary for verbs as well. And whatever it is that you write, you can use it as a description of the concept. And if you are strong enough to maintain that there are no full synonyms, that you are ready to put your effort into describing every single word separately, that you are ready to describe what is the difference between these two near synonyms, then the case is simply that you have one concept per word and there are no synonyms. But it's easier to make the simplification that these near synonyms are considered full synonyms for the purposes of this small dictionary, because this dictionary does not achieve description of all differences between word meanings.
Well, and my second remark is about translation equivalence. According to my experience, most translation equivalents don't work at the word level, but at the multi-word expression level, yes?
I agree.
Do you want to have a concept for every multi-word expression?
Yes.
For every language?
Yes, of course. And I would even say that I'm prepared to have concepts for whole texts. Like, this is the thing that a normal reader who follows the conventions that it is normal to follow in this case would have in mind after reading this text, is the concept for the text. This is very similar to word meanings, that it is conventional to say that texts have meanings. What I would say is that people have opinions about text meanings, which makes it much easier to imagine or to explain to yourself differences of opinion about text meanings. In court, for instance, it's normal to argue about text meanings. And if you say that texts objectively have meanings, then these arguments would be meaningless, I would say.
Okay. Well, thank you very much again, Arvi.
Thank you.